All right, welcome to Cwic Show. My name is Greg Mattson, and I am your host. In this episode, you've heard of What is a Woman, the movie, the documentary from Matt Walsh. But what about what is a parent? It's interesting because as you go through the movie with Matt Walsh, he goes around asking women, what is a woman? And they either can't answer it or they won't answer it. And in many cases, people say that they're not going to continue with the interview because they see it as hate, right? They see somehow this is hate that you're actually asking what a woman is. This is where we have come in society, where Derrida's deconstruction of language and postmodernism has moved things so much more than we realize with this virus in communication in our language, that we cannot even say what a woman is in our society without either being afraid of pointed fingers or of hate speech, being called a hater or whatever it might be. And this is all from the religion of academia. But what goes beyond that? There's what is a woman, but what about what is a parent? If you follow identitarianism, and identitarianism is a product of critical social justice. What identitarianism does, its primary target is the family. You need to see that, right? Whether we're talking about gender, whether we're talking about patriarchy, misogyny, feminism, whether you're talking about sexual orientation, roles of the family, of a husband, of a wife, of a parent, of a child, of a sibling. These are all going to be disintegrated with identitarianism. We must see this. When we go out and say, well, I'm going to support all of this identitarianism, what you're doing is you're destroying the family. You're pulling the traditional family down. That is the aim of this. And there's no way that you can support both. It won't work. So as we've seen this documentary with Matt Walsh on What is a Woman, and no one can answer it, I would say soon we could make a similar documentary that's called What is a Parent? And we'll see here that as we go through these examples here, especially with Ibram Kendi, our good buddy Ibram Kendi, you'll see how things are starting to change and they're being moved into something completely different as far as definition. And as we change the definitions of words or replace words with new words, we change roles, we change relationships. And that's what's happening with parent. And as identitarianism moves into the K-12 space, its job is to put a wedge not just within the child themselves about their gender or their sexual orientation, but to put a wedge between them and their parents. And it's always worked this way with these types of ideologies in the past. Look at what happens here with Matt Walsh in an example of his movie, What is a Woman?
What is a woman? Can you tell me that? Well, you're at the Women's March. You must have some idea. Please, if one person could tell me what a woman is.
Okay, well, he goes through, if you haven't seen this yet, you need to go watch it. He goes through asking several experts, right? Psychologists, pediatricians, surgeons, and women. What is a woman? And he never gets a good response until he finally speaks to his wife at the very end of the show. And it's the same thing that's going on, or is coming down the pike anyway, with the idea of parents. If you watch critical social justice and what it's done going into education, the K-12 space, there are new words that are starting to be used constantly. And one of those new words is a replacement for parent. It is saying parent, we want to redefine the definition here of what parent is, and we want to move this to something more broad so that we can include pediatricians and teachers and others and parents. Dilute the meaning of this. This is what deconstruction is from Derrida. and change the meaning here. And the new word is caregiver. Nowhere do we see this more blatant than in our good friend Ibram Kendi's newest book, How to Raise an Antiracist. Of course, again, they're just like his book that went after anti-racist babies, where it's never too early to try and teach your child Marxian tenets and about immutable characteristics such as race. In this book, he does the same thing. He's going after the kids and after the caregivers of the kids to try and teach them how to raise an anti-racist child. And instead of using the term parent, what he does is he uses the term caregiver. So as an example, when I go through his new book here and I type in the term caregiver, I get 179 matches on this throughout this book. And I want to give you a little flavor of just what it is that he's trying to do here. Again, this is Ibram Kendi. He is one of the grand robe bearers for the religion of academia. So there's major influence here, not just within academia, but culture-wide, he has a huge following, and many people, including corporations and organizations and universities, hold him up as this great hero of our time for this new civil rights, which is not civil rights at all. You've seen a lot of what maybe I've done with BYU and how they held Ibram Kendi up. These teachers, these professors hold him up as some savior and some great revolutionary to our throwing off meritocracy and throwing off liberal democracy and capitalism and, of course, family, because that's what he's moving into as well here. So here's what we get here. His first time he comes up with caregivers is the situation is grave. Caregivers of children are being asked to do more with less. Okay. To many of our societal caregivers, even our racial disparities from health to wealth do not signify an emergency made of racist policies. Here's a few more. Many caregivers are doing something they do not recognize. Here's another one. But are those caregivers actively seeking to protect their children from the racism? How many caregivers recognize their society as dangerous, but let their children roam freely without protection? Bring up Jonathan Haidt here in safetyism at this point. To be an effective caregiver requires us to sometimes do hard things for our kids and with our kids. And then he goes into what he means by caregivers here. And watch what he does here. This book is for the people doing the raising. This book is for caregivers. When I say caregiver, I mean all the people who are nurturing the environments, experiences, minds, bodies, souls, and futures of children. Biological and adopted parents, educators and child workers, doting and indefatigable grandparents, pediatricians and pediatric nurses, faith leaders, and politicians. So again, it's more of a state view, right? We need to understand that there's the family and then there's the state. There is always a conflict here of power. And you choose either to hold up family and the individual first, or you choose to hold up the state. And why is this a state idea? Because everything we're talking about here on what he's talking about in raising up an anti-racist child has to do with policies and procedures that eventually are enforced by the state. And this is what Ibram Kendi believes in. He believes there needs to be a new department, executive branch, or a new department under the executive branch that will oversee, it's basically a DEI branch that oversees anti-racism in the country. So if I have new policies and procedures for pediatricians and how they interact with kids and with educators and with others, even parents, right? Then I'm moving that power over to the state, and the kid becomes more of a product than the child of a parent. And you can see what he does here down a little bit further, where he says, all the aunts and uncles and cousins and friends and coaches and neighbors and counselors and executives and artists and creators and social workers who are part of the caregiving village that raises our children. And then you love this part, this indoctrination part. Raising our children to be anti-racist is like dressing their minds in armor before we send them out into the world. Yeah, what it really does is make them even more brittle and see things such as immutable characteristics and start defining and characterizing individuals into a collective, which is about the most dehumanizing thing you can possibly do. And then I just want to get this one in there because this is important in understanding that if you think you're not a racist, you are, just like one of the BYU professors has told all of his students. It says here, to raise an anti-racist, caregivers must first overcome that inner voice of denial. Think about this optimism and encouragement and hope and faith that is being taught here by Mr. Ibram Kendi. He says they must first overcome that inner voice of denial. They must acknowledge the gravity of the emergency. You must pour salt on the wound. Our society is dangerously racist. And the gravity of their power, I can still raise a child to be anti-racist. This is Ibram Kendi. And so for all of you who champion his work, for all of you at Brigham Young University who hold him up on a pedestal, this man of liberation theology who denies a savior completely in Christianity, but wants to hold up a savior over the oppressors. The man who is a self-proclaimed Marxist, who last year during the uprising of the people of Cuba, right, over the regime there, the Castro communist regime, came out for the Castro communist regime on social media against the people. Of course he did. The man who has said that Castro and his 100 that fought off the vicious American army is the one that needs to be looked at as a hero and that can provide hope for those who are looking for change in anti-racism. He is now also the man that is participating in this postmodern communication of deconstructing language and trying to change the dynamic between what a parent is and what a child is. And this ultimately, if we understand identitarianism, right? Identitarianism is a product of critical social justice. It's not everything, but it is a product of critical social justice. What is in the crosshairs of identitarianism is the traditional family. And you can see this at every single angle, whether it is sexual orientation, whether it is feminism, whether it is patriarchy, misogyny, colonialism, liberal democracy, meritocracy, everything. All of these things, they come after gender, right? They all come after the family. That's what identitarianism does. That is its primary target. So when you believe in identity politics, whether you know it or not, what you're ultimately getting involved with is momentum to deconstruct the traditional family. And you look at this with gender, with Matt Walsh's What is a Woman, and how that is changing, where you have the nominee for the Supreme Court justice being asked, what is a woman? And she can't answer. That's the world that we already live in. She won't answer. She is afraid to answer. Her answer is, I'm not a biologist, is what she said. And so when we lose what a woman is, we lose what a man is. We're beginning to completely lose identity. And part of that disintegration that comes through identitarianism are the roles that are played within a family. So it's your personal identity, and then it's your role. Am I a husband? Am I a wife? Am I a parent? Am I a child? Am I a brother? Am I a sister? Those are all sliding down like a mudslide, right, on the side of a hill. And you may as well prepare yourself for another documentary that'll come out soon, which is basically, what is a parent? And who is going to be able to define that? Because when you deconstruct the language and you fill it, make it pregnant with a broader definition, and you remove the sacredness of a parent-child relationship and put it into a village and to something broader as a caregiver, then people are going to have a very hard time answering it. And what will happen is the same thing you just saw here, where someone cannot answer what is a woman. They're afraid to, more than likely. And some just won't do it. And what do they end up doing? They end up holding off and actually starting to tell Matt Walsh, I think we need to end this interview, because they see it as hate. They see it as hate. They turn it into shame and into hate. And that is what is going to happen with a parent-child relationship. This is Ibram Kendi, folks. This is the man that the religion of academia holds up on a pedestal and says, here is our hero. This is the man that the church-sponsored Brigham Young University holds up as a hero in many of its departments and colleges anyway. The man that is helping to destroy families. The man that is a self-proclaimed Marxist. And this is the primary icon of anti-racism. And in one way or another, I'm sure that he has affected your life, usually not in a positive way. Keep your eye on the roles of families. What does gender, sexual orientation, misogyny, patriarchy, feminism, what do all of these things do to a family? How is it going to change the dynamics as we re-educate our kids into anti-racism and critical social justice and infuse into language identitarianism? What is a parent?